Hey, it's Jared. Today I'm going to compare the M2 iPad Pro. This is the 12.9 inch, and I have the Samsung Galaxy Tab S9 Ultra. And I'm comparing both of these because every year when a new version comes out, whether it be the iPad or the Galaxy, I'm always impressed by the specs and the things that they're able to accomplish with these devices. But am I able to use one better based on the work and the types of things that I do to keep myself productive and also entertained with either of these devices? So I'm going to compare them. This is a full review, having had both of these devices for a while. I purchased the iPad Pro 12.9. This is the M2 when it first came out, so this is now just a little bit old. And I purchased the S29 Ultra. I believe I purchased this around the time that I purchased the Z Fold 5. There was a discount running. I think this model also came out around the same time. Both of them have the keyboard cases. So first, let's talk about quality, kind of build quality and ergonomics and all of that good stuff. Over here, we've got the iPad Pro with the Magic floating special keyboard case, which is pretty expensive. And the iPad is tried and true. Everybody knows what to expect with an iPad. I do have a case on it. I like having this protective case that gives corner protection to the iPad, because when it is in the keyboard case does not have any corner protection really. It has a little bit, but if you drop it on the corner, it's going to ding this in, and it's also going to dent your iPad. So I'll put a link to this Pitaka protector case outer shell, which also has the communication pins for the keyboard, which is why I choose this, and I absolutely love it. So the iPad Pro, great. It's got dual cameras with a LiDAR sensor on the back, magnetic attachment for the Apple Pencil, fantastic Retina XDR display. Overall, fantastic device. 12.9 inch display as well. When we move over to the big boy here, this thing is massive, and this case is two pieces. So I have the keyboard case as well. Here's the keyboard. It comes off and magnetically attaches to the bottom. And then we also have a back plate here as well that has a hidden space for your S Pen, and this can be removed completely, giving you access to the back of the device. And I like having the protection on it because these devices are large and they're easy to drop. It's also easy to ding them, bump them. I mean, they're just large devices. But on this large 14.6 inch display, it is a phenomenal display and a very large device, more in line with the size of something like a laptop. And just to compare the two here, let's just go ahead and set these on top of each other so you can see just how much more screen real estate there is on the Samsung device. So a lot more screen real estate, but not necessarily any taller. I'd say the iPad is maybe just a hair taller. So build quality on both of these devices are great. I don't feel like either one of these are going to be easily breakable as long as you take good care of it. They're both very sturdy devices that I feel safe using in pretty much any situation. As far as weight goes, when they are in their keyboard cases, I feel like the iPad might be a little bit heavier, and that could be because I have that plastic protection case around the iPad, but the iPad does feel maybe just a little bit heavier. I don't have a scale to weigh these, but they're pretty darn close to the same as far as weight goes when you have keyboard cases and S Pen and Apple Pencils attached to them. So let's compare some of the specs. You've got the iPad over here, the Galaxy Tab over here. So on the iPad, we have a 12.9 inch display and 14.6 on the Galaxy. But when it comes to screen resolution on the iPad, we have 2048 by 2732 pixels, and on the Galaxy 1848 by 2960. So a little bit more resolution on the width, but not as much resolution on the height. And you can tell a little bit when you have both of these devices in front of you. You can tell the iPad is just a little bit taller and has just a little bit more resolution. The iPad has a little bit more bezel than the Tab S9 Ultra, but it's not very noticeable. When it comes to cameras, should you want to use a camera on a tablet, the iPad has a 12 megapixel, the Galaxy a 13 megapixel. Both of these cameras take around the same resolution, a little bit higher on the Galaxy with that 13 megapixel. I don't typically take pictures with the tablets. I would primarily use use the front-facing camera. When it comes to RAM, the iPad is going to have 8 or 16 and the Galaxy 12 or 16, and that's going to vary based on the storage model that you chose. On the iPad, if you go with a large storage model, you're going to get the 16 gigs of RAM. Same with the Galaxy Tab, 16 gigs of RAM. When it comes to battery, we have 10,758 milliamp on the iPad, 11,200 on the Galaxy. When it comes to battery life, even though the Galaxy has a bigger battery, I've gotten every single time I have tried to test more battery life out of the iPad. The iPad is definitely better optimized for longer periods of use when it comes to battery, but it does come down to what you are doing on these devices. If I was to just watch TV or movies for an entire length of time, the iPad tends to do a little bit better as far as battery life, but we have a lot larger of a display on the Galaxy, and that may produce a better experience depending on the type of content you're consuming. Both of these devices also support a cellular data plan so that you can have data on these devices even when you're roaming a route not connected to Wi-Fi. I typically use Google Fi or Verizon on my devices depending on which device I'm using. I have a Google Fi SIM in my iPad that I use in conjunction with a Google Fi line, which essentially is T-Mobile here in the US. And I've also tested that same SIM in the Tab S9 Ultra, and both of these devices get excellent coverage and range when it comes to cellular. The data connection is fast and consistent and works flawlessly every single time. So before we do some benchmark tests, let's talk about the keyboards that are attached to both of these devices. On the iPad, we have the Magic Keyboard case from Apple that has a trackpad integrated. It's got USB-C charging on the side. And then on the Tab S9, this is the slim book cover case. This is the model that has the trackpad. There are 2 different models of this case. So if you do decide to purchase one of these, make sure you get the trackpad model because that is the better option. The trackpad on the Galaxy Tab is a lot larger than what's on the iPad, and I really like having a larger trackpad. It gives me the ability to really move around and not have to reposition my fingertip many times as I'm trying to get from one side of the screen to the other. It's very responsive, very easy to use, and when you connect your Tab S9 Ultra to this, it goes into DeX mode automatically, which gives you more of a laptop feel, whereas the iPad just has the iPad interface, which doesn't change whether you're connected to a keyboard or not. The key travel on both of these keyboards seems pretty much the same, maybe just a little bit clickier on the iPad. So different tones that come from these keyboards, about the same amount of key travel, and my experience is typing on these. I felt like the Tab was maybe a little bit easier because it's a little bit wider of a keyboard, whereas the keyboard on the iPad is a little bit more compressed. But if you look at the actual keys themselves, they're about the same spacing as far as the letters go. What you're really getting is larger keys on the outer sides here on the Tab S9 Ultra that really makes the difference. So overall, I do really like the keyboard on the Tab S9. If I was choosing one of these devices to do a lot more writing, I probably would choose the keyboard on the Tab S9 because of the larger trackpad and a little bit bigger keyboard overall. So as far as performance goes, we're going to go ahead and run a Geekbench 6 test. So I'm just going to tap start on both of these. A little bit late on the iPad, but I'm going to run the test on both of these so we can see the performance specs. But overall, I have found that both of these devices are well overpowered for the type of apps that you typically would use on them. For email, internet browsing, basic everyday use, both of these devices are way overpowered and you're not going to run into any issues. Where I did start to see a bigger difference between these two devices was when I went into applications that require more resources, such as Adobe Lightroom for photo editing. I do a lot of photo editing and I like to do that from a tablet from time to time. And I found that the iPad is a little bit faster when moving around, getting between photos, jumping into albums, moving photos between different albums, and doing edits, also with applying edits to multiple photos. The Tab S9 was a little bit slower in that regard, but the true time saver is really how much time is spent exporting images, and we'll take a look at that after we do this benchmark. So benchmarks are just really one measurement of performance for both devices. It doesn't necessarily mean that one is going to be better than the other at any specific task, but it's nice to have baselines that we can look at as far as comparing the performance of both of these devices. Now, I do often get asked which type of device is better for gaming. Is it an iPad or an Android tablet? And I have to say, it really depends on the games that you play. I have found that, of course, on the Apple device, there are a lot more games available than there are on Android. And some of those games are a little bit better optimized because they're optimized for the hardware. Whereas on Android, they've got to be optimized more for the software because the hardware can really vary. And so game performance, depending on the game, has been really good on both of these devices. I haven't found to be much of a difference, except for very busy games that have a lot going on. And that really comes down to, I think, the user interface, not necessarily the device itself. I don't spend a lot of time gaming on my tablets, and I don't spend a lot of time gaming in the first place. So my comparison really is just testing a couple of basic games just to see how they are to play, whether you're on an iPad or an Android tablet like this one. Now, another thing you might think about when it comes to devices that are this thin, that have this much power, is how's the cooling on these devices? Do they get hot? Do they heat up under stress? And to be honest, I have never felt much heat off of either one of these devices. Yes, if you're using it during the summer, maybe on a really warm day, the device is going to feel warm because of the ambient temperature, and then because it is an electronic device, it may heat up a little bit more. But it's very rare that I feel any heat off of either one of these devices. They are running benchmark tests right now, which typically are taxing the processors a little bit, and both of these devices are cool to the touch and haven't changed temperature at all since I pulled them out and started using them. Both of them are extremely cool to the touch. Now, one of the new things that I've been doing on the iPad is using Final Cut Pro, which is a full video editor that Apple has for the Mac that they've also brought over to the iPad. It's not my favorite way to edit, but it's nice that it has it as an option on the iPad. And there are video editors available for Android, but not really any video editors that I enjoy using, and the experience with those video editors is lackluster. So I tend to not do any video editing on the Android tablet because it's just not a great experience due to the software, not the actual device itself. All right, so we have a benchmark score of a single core 2646 and multi-core score of 10,012. All right, so on the Galaxy Tab S9, you can see we've got a pretty big difference in our scores. We've got single core at 2106 and multi-core score at 5,684. So the iPad is almost double the multi-core score performance that we see on this device here, which certainly doesn't mean that the Tab S9 is a slouch in comparison to the M2. It just means that in terms of raw performance power that is available to be used, the iPad has more of it. Now we're going to run GPU benchmarks, which will show us the performance of the graphics on both of these devices. I expect that the iPad will probably still reign superior, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the Galaxy Tab S9 Ultra has any issues with producing graphics. So let's talk a little bit about the software, because that's really the big difference between both of these devices. There are a lot of apps that I utilize in my daily life that are just not available on Android. They are only available on iOS. For example, I have my private pilot's license, and so I use an iPad with an app called ForeFlight, which is not available on Android. I also predominantly use a Mac as my main computer, and so having an iPhone and an iPad just makes the experience really nice. When it comes to sending files between those devices using AirDrop, being able to respond to messages on any of my devices and the iMessage app, it's just a better overall experience that I can't really replicate that easily on an Android tablet. Even with all Samsung devices, be it a Samsung tablet, a Samsung phone, and even a Samsung laptop, you're not going to get the same cohesive experience across all those devices. All right, so now let's look at these GPU performance numbers. On the iPad, we've got almost 46,000 as our score. And on the S9, we've got 9,538, which is very, very, very small number in comparison to the iPad. But as I said before, these scores don't tell the entire tale because raw performance is not necessarily needed for everyday tasks. Okay, so now let's take a look at exporting photos out of an Adobe Lightroom gallery. Now, in Adobe Lightroom, I edit a lot of my photos. These are photos of my son's basketball teams that I took pictures of. And we're going to select all of these images. There's 145 in the gallery. So we'll select all of these images. Let's go ahead and do that. So 145 images selected on both. As you can see, we're going to click share and click share. All of these have been downloaded to the device as far as I know, because that's what it says on the app. But let's go ahead and hit save copy to device. And let's see, boy, we are off to a burning start over on the Galaxy Tab. It's just burning through these, exporting these really fast. And over here on the iPad, it's saying downloading original, even though I already have all these devices downloaded, have the option selected to download and store all of these images locally. But over here on the iPad, it seems to have not done that because it is downloading some. Over here on the Galaxy Tab, it's just burning through those images. And to be honest, this is really fast, extremely fast exporting, probably about as fast as if I was using the computer itself. And so even though we have a lot less performance here on the Galaxy Tab, we're seeing it go a lot faster than the iPad. And so we're getting down to the end here. For some reason, it's kind of stopped towards the end, but it's getting close. While over here on the iPad, it's still downloading original for some reason. And so I don't know. All I can do is go into the app and say, store locally, and watch it download everything, which it did. Now look, it's done over here. It told me here's how much storage it's going to take up, and I downloaded everything locally. And for some reason over here, it's still downloading original. And so perhaps maybe on the iPad, it is downloading a reasonable resolution of the image, but not the entire thing. I don't really know. But what I do know is that even if all of the images were downloaded here, which I have other galleries that were uploaded using this device, so I know that the full image is stored on the iPad. The iPad still was significantly slower when it comes to exporting, so that was really fast. Now, one thing, if you are a photo editor and you want to use a tablet like this for photo editing, getting photos into the iPad is much easier. You plug a USB-C device into the side of the iPad, and you can load images right into Lightroom. Whereas on Android, you have to actually load those images into a file folder first before you can import them into Lightroom. It's for some reason, I've just never been able to figure out an easy way to get images into Lightroom. But looking at how much time this is going to take, I definitely would still save time using the Galaxy Tab. So let's just go ahead and cancel this because that's just crazy. You can see here on this device, it has the blue little check mark that everything is stored locally. The same blue little icon that is shown right here, indicating that yes, those images are stored locally. So just because you have a ton of performance under the hood doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to result in a ton of performance when you're utilizing different applications. So let's revisit battery life. We've had the screens on for both of these devices the same amount of time, and we've done pretty much the same tasks on both of these devices. The iPad is at 99 and the Galaxy Tab is at 95. And that is about how fast of a difference things start to depart when it comes to battery life. I know that if I want to use something all day long, my iPad is going to get me there. But if I want to use the Tab S9, probably going to need to take some sort of a charger with me if I'm planning to use it all day. And that's the same difference that you find between using like a Mac and a PC typically. A Mac is going to have a much better battery life than the PC. Doesn't necessarily mean that the Mac is going to be better when it comes to performance than the PC is. So let's talk about pricing. Both of these devices are priced pretty close to the same. Over here with the M2 12.9 inch, we're looking at about $1,100 US or $1,099 for the price. And over here, we're looking at $1,079, which is just a little bit cheaper. It is looking like maybe that's a sale price too, because $1,319 or $1,320 is the overall price. You can see here after we select our display, you have memory and storage options here. So you can see the 12 gig RAM option comes with the 256 or 512 and the 16 with the 1 terabyte. If we go 1 terabyte, that is where the price starts to separate. On the iPad, 1 terabyte is $1,800, whereas on the Galaxy Tab, it's $1,620. So about $180 difference there. That starts to become quite a big deal. If we look at the 512, we're at $1,079, and 512 here is $1,399. So really, the price is the same on both of these devices. If you get the 128 gig on the iPad or the 256 because it's on sale with the Galaxy Tab. And I've got links down in the description below to the best pricing that I've been able to find for both of these devices, so definitely check that out. So when it comes to pricing, you're definitely going to get more value for the dollar out of the S9 Ultra. It's a bigger device. Obviously, it's got a lot of power, and it is a bit cheaper. And on the Android side here, there's the Galaxy Tab S9 Fan Edition Plus, which is a cheaper, more budget-friendly, larger device. And so as we can see here, we've got the FE Plus at $550, and we can get it with a little bit more storage. That's $650. And essentially, this is kind of like the iPad Air for Samsung. So a little bit less performance, less storage. The specs are a bit lower, but definitely much better on the price tag. So let me hit a couple of pros and cons about each of these devices. With the iPad, the pros definitely are a better app selection, better battery life, better consistency among its product line. So better connectivity with iPhone and with Mac computers. The cons, I would say, is that you are kind of locked into that ecosystem. There are certain aspects of the iPad OS that just are not going to work as well with a Windows PC as something like an Android tablet. So you are locked more into the ecosystem with an iPad. That would be probably the only con that I would say, aside from the fact that this is a pretty expensive device. Now, the pros with the Galaxy Tab are that it has a very large display, very beautiful display. Even though the benchmarks aren't as great on this device when it comes to performance, as we saw, it still performs pretty well when it comes to doing things like exporting a lot of photos. So I have no gripes there. Other benefits, I would say, the S Pen is really good, and the S Pen's designed to work on a device level, not necessarily app specific. And so you can use the S Pen pretty much anywhere on this device, whereas the Apple Pencil is really great, but doesn't have as many built-in features on the software level and the hardware level as the S Pen does. Now, the pros, of course, on this device are going to be the battery life's a little bit lower. It is a very large device, so if you're looking for something that's a little bit easier to carry around, the larger the device, the harder that's going to be. And another pro I'd say about the Galaxy Tab is that it has DeX, which means you can use it in this tablet mode, which is traditional Android tablet, and then you can go into DeX mode, which makes it function more like a laptop, where you can have multiple windows and move them around, and it's just a great overall experience, giving you a hybrid use for this device, tablet and kind of a low-powered laptop at the same time, which is awesome. Now, as far as the cons of this device, I would say it's the Android tablet operating system, where Samsung has done a really good job to keep the operating system going and give the best experience that they can when it comes to Android on a tablet. But Android, as far as tablets go, just does not get as much love as the phones do, and so a lot of things fall behind. A lot of apps tend to not scale that great on the Android tablet and may look a little bit weird depending on what you were expecting. But if you go into DeX mode, then you can have apps be different widths and stuff like that, which I think maybe makes up for that fact a little bit. But as far as other pros, I would say not being able to use this device in conjunction with all of my other devices in an easy way. Obviously, there is a way for me, if I'm on a Android phone, to respond to text messages utilizing this device, but it requires a lot of additional setup and things that sometimes stop working that I then have to go in and reconnect. And on the Apple devices, it's seamless because it's baked in to the experience. When I do choose this device to take to client meetings or to go work at a coffee shop, I often get people asking me what device it is because they know it's not an iPad, it's something different. So I end up spending time talking to them about it, explaining all of the goodness that is the Tab S9 Ultra. I'll leave you up to decide which one's best for you. You can, of course, ask questions down in the comment section below. I'll do my best to answer them. And I'm always impressed by just how many other people jump into the comments and help out as well. Check out the links below for pricing on both of these devices, and make sure to click that subscribe button so you can be notified when I put out new videos. We'll see you in the next one.